that if Britain were to go to war and expend artillery shells at the rate the Ukrainians are expending them around Bakhmut, we'd run out of ammunition in 5 hours, which is 5 hours of warfare. These guys have been fighting in Bakhmut for 7 months. Britain as a country's army, when we kind of refigured the army and we looked at the warfare and the threats around the world and what was a current threat, the idea of like prolonged artillery battles and prolonged tank battles on the plains of West Germany were the kind of thinking of the 60s, 70s and 80s. And after the fall of the wall, the perceived threat changed. So we started going, well, we don't need so many tanks, we don't need so many heavy artillery guns. They just stopped thinking about warfare in that way. And then all of a sudden, we have exactly what they'd thought we weren't going to have. So consequently, our stocks of ammunition are incredibly low when it comes. There was the former head of the army, I think it was, or the former head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said that if Britain were to go to war and expend artillery shells at the rate the Ukrainians are expending them around Bakhmut, we'd run out of ammunition in 5 hours, which is 5 hours of warfare. These guys have been fighting in Bakhmut for 7 months. So consequently, the whole NATO stockpile and the former NATO, the former Warsaw Pact countries' stockpiles of these shells are massively depleted, and they can't. It's an industrial scale job to start making artillery shells in them quantities to feed the beast that is now being fought on the plains of Ukraine.
There's been loads of people. There have been lots of commentators talking about how it's going to make the Ukrainian offensive more difficult if they're going to be expending all their ammunition maintaining Bakhmut. What's your assessment of that?
There's a couple of options here. Either you let Bakhmut fall, which opens up the doors, opens the roads up to Kramatorsk and Konstantinivka and Slovyansk, and then you find yourself defending an even wider position. Or you hold Bakhmut, you keep them from flooding through the hole and into Donbass and taking the rest of Donetsk. Or you somehow try and hold it and go on the offensive, which is what the Ukrainians really need to do. They can't afford to sit back and just keep holding land. At some point or other, they need to go on the offensive. And we think, by all accounts, that's what's happening. They're moving fresh troops in. A lot of the new hardware is starting to arrive, or should start to arrive shortly in theatre. So my thoughts are the Ukrainians are building up for a counter-offensive, which is something they have to do if they're going to win this. If they're going to achieve their goal of getting Russia out of Ukraine, they have to go on a counter-offensive. But yeah, it's been difficult. I think the Russians possibly at about the full stretch now around Bakhmut. I don't think they have the reserves, the ammunition, the trained soldiers to carry on this offensive they're waging at the moment. I think they're almost burnt out around Bakhmut. And I wouldn't be surprised if over the coming weeks we start to see Ukrainians probing in the opposite direction as the counter-offensive gathers speed.
Why are the battles right now being fought so much with mortars and artillery? A lot of the time we think of war now, we think it's all in the sky, it's all planes, but why is this particular front now so heavily reliant on mortars and ammunition like that?
Well, it's the Russians' preferred method of warfare, artillery warfare. That's why they are so prepared for it. They have so many Grad missiles and multiple launch rocket systems. And the Ukrainians have had to learn to adapt. They didn't have massive artillery units before. But the answer to your question is, it's the perfect territory for armoured, heavy armoured artillery shells. If it was another kind of territory, you wouldn't do this in the desert. You wouldn't last 10 minutes. But all these rolling hills and woodlands and copses make it ideal for artillery warfare. Take it to another location, it would be a different kind of warfare. You do have the trenches, you do have the guys shooting it out, and you do have the 93rd Battalion in Bakhmut itself fighting street to street, but they're trying to hold it. But it is, by and large, an artillery warfare, which is the worst kind of war. I hate it, because it's unpredictable and death comes quickly from the skies.
Based on what we've seen when we were travelling all through that region, from Seversk, Sloviansk, Konstantinivka, all the way around the Bakhmut district, how important and how relevant is it going to be on what you've seen of the actual geography of the area, in terms of how the Russians are going to advance, what the Ukrainians are going to do, in terms of the hills and the actual physical geography?
I think it's really important. I think the defender has the upper hand in this situation. The Ukrainians, as we saw, they've in certain positions, they pre-dug the trenches, they dug in. And it leaves you, if you're going on the offensive, you have to cross these, you have to come over the high ground, then into a valley, and then fight your way up the high ground. That's atrocious for any army to have to fight the way across open ground when someone else has got the high ridges. So the actual geography plays a massive part of what's happening in that area. At the moment, you see the names of towns, but when you look at the ridges and the coordinates of these places, you very much see the fighting for the high ground. Everyone wants that high ground, and if you can connect pieces of high ground up, you have a massive advantage.
When we visited the region last month, or about 3 weeks ago, Konstantinivka, it was a bit quieter than how loud it was when we were there a few days ago. What is your assessment of what's going to happen and why it's gotten so loud?
I think it's gotten so loud in Konstantinivka because the Russians are aware that the Ukrainians are putting together offensive units and are starting to slowly push them up to the front, ready for a counter-offensive. And rather than allow these units to become mobilized and active and actually be on the move, they're trying to strike and hit them before they fully form up, ready for the offensive. Hence, Chessiv Yar getting hit badly and Konstantinivka getting hit badly. They're just not allowing, or they're trying to disrupt the build-up of the offensive forces before they actually go on an offensive. I think the Ukrainians will build up. I think with the additional tanks that are coming, with the additional long-range, small-diameter bombs that are coming, they will disrupt the Russian supply lines enough to start a counter-offensive. I would say within the next month, you will see some sort of movement along that line. The Russian territorial gains over winter have been minimal. So I think, as that they've been building up new divisions, new recruits have come in, been trained, new weaponry coming in, longer range rockets to disrupt the supply lines. I think we will see progress on the Ukrainian counter-offensive 4 to 6 weeks, I guess.
Cool.